So with our lovely Mr. K over here, he had done a little bit with some play behavior. So in our previous video, so right now I'm just warming him up with a couple find its. I know I lightly touched based on it in the last one. So find its are typically a great exercise for getting a puppy that's a little overexcited or a little bit mouthy, or even a dog that's maybe a little bit apprehensive to kind of get a little bit more comfortable. The benefit of doing find its again is that it's more fun for your babe to go search for the snack, as I mentioned earlier, and chasing the snack seems very exciting. It's also a great way to motivate your babe to sometimes also keep all four on the floor. So if, let's say, he was very excited and he was trying to do some jumping, obviously before he learns how to go to a spot or a placemat, and before he learns how to work maybe a sit or a down stay, obviously if those skills have not been mastered yet, giving him something that is attainable that he can then perform and do well may be more beneficial than then getting agitated for him not knowing how to do the more advanced level skills, while he's then also applying that jumping behavior that tends to agitate or sometimes doesn't feel so good for us. So when it comes to Mr. Handsome, I know he came in also on the equipment the shelter had actually given you. So this is where I would recommend a Y-shaped body harness. The reason behind that is harnesses that affect the shoulder movement are not one of my favorites because when it's affecting the way your dog is moving, it might affect the way they're feeling physically, but also mentally. So whenever equipment technically causes harm or discomfort, it tends to only change behavior for a little while, and it might actually create behavior that's being suppressed or behavior that comes out even bigger later. So we'll dive more into that as we're progressing. But you'll see that right now he's borrowing one of my other harnesses that I just have here lying around as a spare. It is a lupine brand. It does not mean that's the brand you have to go with. But you'll see with Mr. Handsome, if I get him to sort of look towards the camera, it creates this little Y shape in between here in his little front legs and his neck area. You can see his whole shoulder blade right here can move without being restricted. If his movement is being restricted to try to prevent pulling, then what ends up happening is, imagine again, some of the harnesses out there do tighten and restrict movement to try to prevent the dog from pulling. But the whole problem there is the dog is still not being taught how not to pull and how to walk nicely on gear. So for a lot of dogs, being switched into equipment that either hurts or restricts movement or also, for example, restricts airflow, doesn't necessarily teach the dog what not to do. It might also teach the dog that when things are going on around them, they also might start to hurt or feel uncomfortable. So if, let's say, for example, a dog was wearing a prong collar or pinch collar, and even though the dog might be a happy-go-lucky type of dog versus a fearful dog, I don't recommend the tool for either or any. So the problem with using a corrective tool is that a lot of times you're suppressing behavior versus getting at the root cause as to why is my dog feeling that way and how can I make them feel safe again. So remember, if he was wearing, let's say, a prong collar, and then as he goes to play with one of his neighbor dogs, he's then technically getting corrected throughout the play, even though he's not doing anything wrong. Oh my goodness, chewing. So if, let's say, for example, he's playing with one of those neighborhood dogs and he's wearing the prong, maybe in the beginning he was doing okay, but then as he continuously gets poked by it while playing, he could start to associate the other dogs as the ones that are also harming him or making it feel uncomfortable or painful. That can also apply to other people or other things in the environment. So let's say your babe was a bit nervous or a bit agitated or a little overwhelmed by something, and you go to correct them with the equipment, even if it's as simple as a flat buckle collar, your dog might start to think that when new scary people arrive, it's going to also become fearful or harmful or uncomfortable while they're seeing that trigger. So your dogs can start to associate the correction as now that thing that they already found scary is now also harming or hurting them. So with Mr. Handsome, chewing is optional, so don't worry, they're all a little eager for snacks sometimes. You'll see that throughout the session, I'm also capturing really nice behavior. So if he's offering all four on the floor, if he's offering a gorgeous little sit position, I'm gonna feed him for all of these. But remember, equipment shouldn't change behavior. Equipment should just be there for safety reasons. So what I mean by that is view your equipment like training wheels. So training wheels don't teach you how to ride your bicycle, but if someone informs you while you're wearing the training wheels how to pedal, how to stop, and how to steer, then you can learn how to ride the bicycle and eventually take the training wheels off. So for example, a body harness shouldn't be affecting behavior either, and they should have full mobility to their body parts. So their legs should be able to move and extend naturally. If the harnesses are restrictive, where they squeeze or wiggle on the dog, what can end up happening is the dog might start to compensate, and then they might start to become sore or have issues with their physique as well. So almost imagine if you were wearing two different size shoes and you're being told to go hike or go for a big walk, you will more than likely be uncomfortable and sore because of your body trying to compensate that whole time with the uneven feeling. So for Mr. Handsome right now, we're just warming up again with those Find Its. I did recommend to maybe potentially get a Y-shaped harness. Nice job, sir. So that way your dog's limbs and neck won't be harmed while he's learning. The problem with collars, from prong to shock to any type of adversive, is a lot of times you are again now suppressing behavior but not getting at the root cause as to why my dog is responding to things in the first place. Two, we also want to be very careful not to create a zero dog. A zero dog, as I've mentioned to some of my students in the past, is a dog that has been scolded for maybe natural responses to fear or anxiety. And so let's say, for example, someone comes over and let's pretend they're wearing a sombrero and some funny other attire, and your puppy now gets a bit nervous. When they go to grumble, we might think again, remember, behavior for us is good or bad. For dogs, a lot of times they are completely amoral. So behavior is only happening because of either they feel safe or they feel unsafe. So when your dog is feeling nervous or overwhelmed, they'll give natural dog responses to fear or anxiety, which could be a growl. So for example, and my neighbors are doing some work next door, so he might hear those noises here and there. So let's say, for example, my friend comes over, she got a sombrero, Mr. Handsome, let's say he gets nervous and he growls. If we were to say no or knock it off or scold him for growling, he might then start to think growling is no longer acceptable, and therefore he'll skip the growl. And maybe now this next time my friend comes over again, she's wearing another funny hat, and maybe he gets a bit nervous once more, but he skips the growl because that's been punished and has been told it's not okay. And now from there, he goes from no growl to snap and bite in the air to make the scary thing leave him alone. Because from his perspective, we are now getting rid of his whispers of saying how he's feeling, and he might go right into yelling. So the second, or the next little scenario, let's say again, my friend comes over once more, and we've gotten rid of the growl, we've gotten rid of the warning, snap, bite in the air. So now the dog feels there's no other way to give me space. I'm feeling scared. I need more, again, a bubble to feel comfortable. In that situation, now the friend might be like, wow, he's gotten so comfortable. Look at him, he's not making any noises. His behaviors, again, lack of behavior is still behavior. And now let's say the friend comes over, reaches in to go pat, and now the dog goes and bites. So I'm not saying Mr. K is going to necessarily go and gobble up people, but remember that a lot of times the way we deal with what we consider problems is in a way that tends to actually suppress or make behavior worse from the dog's perspective. So just like with us, we like to feel safe. So if we have our choices taken from us, and let's say there's someone coming down a dark alley to approach you, you may also feel uncomfortable and your fight or flight responses might come out. So make sure that when we're working with, especially a new rescue or even a new dog to the household, is that we make sure they're feeling comfortable throughout the learning process and throughout experiences. If equipment that's being used might also add some conflict to the dog, I'd recommend to go with equipment that's benign. So typically a Y-shaped body harness that's non-restrictive is a great way to start, because then while you're learning and he's learning, there's no corrections being done, and there's no potential damage to his trachea. So when wearing a flat collar, he can actually apply a lot of force into the neck area, and he can damage his trachea and get a collapsed trachea. He could damage his thyroid glands. He could also, for example, cause spinal injuries as well. So this is where if you're ever working later down the road on a longer training leash, like a long line, for working recalls or for working through distances or distractions, I would always recommend to attach him to a body harness instead of a collar as well. So, but we'll go ahead, we'll work a few more little skills for Mr. Handsome, but I just wanted to show you that he's rocking this Y-shaped body harness for now. And then that way I'll show you how we're gonna work a little bit with some loose leash walking skills and a few others throughout the week as well for the handsome guy. But he's doing a splendid job. He's got some really great behaviors already pretty well pat into his little repertoire of things he wants to offer. And, but I know Mom had mentioned sometimes he gets a little mouthy when he's younger because again, he's a teenager. So when he gets a little excited or a little overwhelmed, I feel like a lot of times the puppies will do displacement behaviors and sometimes become a little bit more mouthy. So we'll do a little find it. We'll give Mr. Handsome a little breather and we'll come back and work a few more skills. Nice job, sir. That was beautiful. What a good boy, Mr. K.